Now, Oedipus represents the classical drama the classical drama is probably the height of the intellectuality of the classical period. The classical period isn't always intellectual. When cultures start out in their beginnings, are they intellectual or emotional? Are they organized and have lots of rules right from the get-go and a lot of structure?
No.
No. They generally start out emotional and then gradually they get more intellectual the longer they go on. And that's, of course, what happens with the Greeks. The theater, drama, really starts out as religion. And in fact, it starts out as magic. The distinction between magic and religion is pretty thin. By definition, magic is the manipulation of symbolic objects to cause supernatural forces to make change in the physical world. In other words, if you prayers of thanksgiving, prayers of praise is religion. As soon as you start praying to win the lottery, you're no longer practicing religion. You're now practicing magic because you're manipulating symbolic objects, words, to try to get supernatural forces, God, to make changes in the physical world. Initially, this is an agrarian society, and so their most important thing is getting the crops to grow. And so their initial magic is, their religion, paganism largely is anyway, a fertility religion. It's a religion about how to get the crops to grow. And you want to manipulate symbolic objects. So the best symbolic object for, you want the crops to grow, everybody in the tribe goes out into the fields, gets naked, jumps in a pile, and gives the best example of fruitfulness that they can. That attracts the forces of generation. Those forces say, oh, there's going to be a lot more of them soon. They're going to need more food. We'll give them a good harvest. You remember that among the gods, although Zeus is the king of the gods, he wasn't the favorite. The favorite god was Bacchus or Dionysus. Anybody know what he was god of? Wine. How do you celebrate the god of wine?
Drink.
You drink. It's a religious requirement to drink. And so you get drunk. Now when you get drunk as part of the ceremony, it's because Bacchus has possessed you. You're a special person. Bacchus has come down and got inside of you. So at first in the Dionysian revels, the people who got drunk the quickest were the important people. So pretty soon everybody's getting drunk pretty quick. So you have to something to set the special people apart, and they become the people who can stand up. That alone, at first, this probably makes you special. And then who can make up poetry about how wonderful the wine is to praise the god Bacchus. More and more people get able to do that, so then it becomes having to memorize special poems about Bacchus. And the whole ritual, certain things have to be said in certain places, and it's all carried on, as most magic is, in a circle. And when we come to the Greek theater, it's a circle. It's still that magic ritual. The other favorite god, beside Bacchus, is Pan, the god of sex and dancing. So how do you celebrate the god of sex and dancing? Dance and have sex. And in fact, the earliest form of the play is not tragedy, but the comedy. And the comedies were meant to get everybody ready for the orgy. And basically, they weren't hilarious by our standards, but you got to remember, this is a primitive, relatively primitive society. The comedies at first consisted of people in goatskin pants, guys in goatskin pants for the most part, because Pan is a goat from the waist down. Because goats are known for their sexual prowess, so naturally the god of sex would have the best equipment. He would be a goat. Waving phallic objects and prodding one another with them and dancing around. Now we wouldn't find all that funny, but they thought that was hilarious. Well, if you're taking some young lady out and you hope she'll go back to your apartment with her, what's the smartest thing to do? Take her to a really sad movie or take her to a comedy club? Comedy club, she'll be laughing, she'll be in a good mood, she'll be much more likely to say yes. So the comedy is really to get everybody kind of loosened up for the party that's coming. And the comedy is what drama is under the Dionysians. The Dionysians are when Greece is emotion. And it's all about the celebration of the gods and the celebration of life. A lot like the Middle Ages. But as Greek culture matures, the Dionysians get replaced by the Apollonians. And the Apollonians are the followers of Apollo, and Apollo is the god of moral rectitude, of proper behavior, of the intellect. And so the intellect starts to take over. And that's when you're really getting into the height of the classical tradition. And the tragedy develops as a way to teach people about paganism. And what it mainly wants to teach them is, whatever you do, accept the will of the gods. Every Greek tragedy really has the same plot. A famous person of some importance, the play opens with them at the height of their power. They insist on having their will instead of the will of the gods. That's hubris, and they get destroyed for it. And of course, that's what happens in Oedipus. When they went to see Oedipus, how many of you were surprised at the end that Oedipus turns out to be the guy that's killed the king, and that it's his mother who was his father, and that he's married to his mother? So you all heard of this before then, right? Or read it before? One. Okay, now that's not the way it happened for the Greeks. Nobody went to that theater without already knowing the whole story of Oedipus, and of Oedipus' ancestors, and of what happens after Oedipus Rex closes. They all went there knowing exactly what was going to happen. And the reason they did was because what the drama was supposed to do was, for a while, put the ordinary people in the position of the gods. If you've ever seen a Greek theater, it's circular, and the seats go up like this, around. Where do the gods live? Up on Mount Olympus. And they look down on lives whose outcomes they know. So in other words, here are the people sitting above the play, like the gods, looking down on the lives of the characters whose outcome they already know. And they have the same feeling that the gods have when they watch us struggle. When Oedipus says, when we find the murderer of King Laius, no one is to give him aid, what does everybody in the audience know? Who has he just pronounced sentence on? Himself. He has no clue that that's what his words mean. But they know. That's what's called dramatic irony, the difference between what the audience knows and what the actors know. And the gods sit around hearing us say that kind of stuff all the time. The gods know what's going to happen to us next. So we make plans as if certain things we think that we want to happen are going to happen. The gods know they aren't. So that every time we say something, it's just drenched with dramatic irony for them. So when you watch the play, you're sitting up above, watching the events down below. You know how they're going to come out. And the play is all about hubris. Hubris is overweening, pride, or ambition. And it's what you always get punished for. Now, everybody in this play actually gets what they deserve. They get what they deserve because they put their will above the will of the gods. In a world where everything is already determined, where your fate has already been settled, you can't do anything to change that. And you remember that the only defense you have is to prepare yourself for it and to keep your intellect in charge. Well, it would be a lot easier to prepare yourself for what was going to happen to you if you knew what it was. So naturally, everybody wants to know the future. The Greeks, and after them the Romans, were preoccupied with knowing what the future was. And the reason for that is because if they knew what it was, even though they couldn't change it, they could at least get themselves under control and be able to meet it. And there was a place, in fact, a number of places, where they could go to find out their futures. They were called the oracles. And they were all under the auspices of the gods. Some of them were in famous temples. They took all different shapes. One was a fire that answered your question. One was a hermaphrodite, a guy with, or it wouldn't really be a guy, a person with both sexes. And he would answer the questions. There was another where there was a cave you would go into. And you would ask the question aloud, and the answer would come booming back at you from all sides. Now later they discovered that there was a hole in the roof of this cave that went up like a funnel to a place above ground where the priest of Apollo listened to your question and then shouted down the answers. Now we would think that was a fraud, but the classical period would say, no, that's how the god talks back. He talks back through the priest. And the reason the priest doesn't just come up and tell you face to face is because you might not recognize it as a God's word. You might ignore it. You'd get destroyed. Instead, he shouts it down this funnel. It echoes from everywhere. It sounds like this big booming voice. It's real impressive. It sounds like a god, and you follow what the oracle tells you to do. So the gods are being kind by doing it this way. It's just a mechanism they use, but it's still the gods doing the talking. The oracles, however, are generally pretty ambiguous. The gods don't want to give everything away. They like to see you struggle against your fate. They want to see that tragedy hit you with full impact. So they try not to give too much away, and although they will tell you about your future, they often tell it to you in ambiguous terms. For example, I think it's... that's gone too. One of the Greek states, I think it's Xerxes, comes with a huge army, and he wants tribute. This is generally what you did if you had a big army. You went around the cities and you said, give us some money and we'll go away. And if they gave you money, you left them alone, came back a couple years later and demanded some more money. And if they didn't give you money, then you trashed the place and stole everything they had. So most people paid. It's kind of like an early protection racket. We'll protect you from us if you give us some money. They didn't know whether to give them the money or to fight. So they went to the oracle. And they said, what will happen if we stand up to him? The oracle says, if you stand up to him, a great army will be destroyed. So they do stand up to him, and they get trashed. And as they're running off the battlefield, they realize the oracle was right. A great army was destroyed. Their army. But they couldn't tell that ahead of time. So it often gives you ambiguous information. Now, Laius, this goes all the way back 3 or 4 generations. There was a guy named Atreus. And he hated another guy so much that he killed his children and fed them to him. And the gods thought that was an awful thing to do because it was first of all, broke the rules of hospitality. When you invite somebody over for dinner, you can't serve them their children. That's a big taboo. So the gods hate Atreus so much they curse him and all his descendants. Well, Laius is one of his descendants. Way before the play opens, Laius meets Jocasta, the queen, and they fall in love. And they do what any young couple would do in Greece in those days. They go to an oracle to find out how their life is going to turn out. And the oracle says you're going to have a son who will grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. Now that's the will of the gods. The oracle tells you what the gods want. They want this kid to grow up, kill his father, marry his mother. What should Laius and Jocasta do?
Kill his son.
That's what they do. Sorry, go ahead.
Not have a son.
Nope, that's what they try to do. They should accept it. It's the will of the gods. They don't want it to happen to them. It's a terrible thing to happen to them. But they don't mean anything. Remember, human beings don't matter. The gods matter. This is what the gods have decreed. You should accept it. And if they had accepted it, it wouldn't have happened. Because you notice that when Oedipus finds out that he's going to kill his father and marry his mother, he runs away. If they had kept Oedipus at home and raised him and waited for it to happen, Oedipus would have gone to an oracle when he grew up, just like he did. The oracle would have said, you're going to kill your father and marry your mother, and Oedipus would have run away, and the prophecy wouldn't have been fulfilled. If they had just accepted the will of the gods. And of course they don't. Instead, first thing they try to do is not have children. You notice it's putting their will above the will of the gods. That's hubris. You get punished for that. But that doesn't work. At first it works. They stay away from each other. They don't sleep together. But another god intervenes, the god Bacchus. They have a drink one night. And then they have a second drink. And then they forget all about, oh, we shouldn't sleep together until the next morning. By which time it's too late. Jocasta's pregnant. Okay, the baby's coming. Now the baby gets born. What should they do? They should raise it and wait for it to kill its father and marry its mother. Because that's what the gods want. But they don't. Now you might wonder, why doesn't... now what's his father's name? The king? Oedipus' father. I just mentioned him about 4 times now. Laius. You wonder why Laius doesn't just pick up the baby and go, oh, how, whoops, oh, drop them again. Drop them 4 or 5 times, you think, problem solved. Well, it isn't, because you remember those rules. You have to give hospitality, you have to bury the dead, you can't betray hospitality. One of the biggest is you can't kill a blood relative. This was a time when fortunes were passed on to the oldest son. So a lot of second sons tried to arrange accidents for their older brothers. So they had to make this a real important rule. You can't kill your siblings. You can't kill your parents. You can't kill your children. You can't kill any blood relatives. If you do, it's so bad a crime that there are special beings who do nothing but police that, who torment those who kill blood relatives. They're called the Furies, or the Eumenides. They're part eagle and they're part woman. And you'll see them in the second play. They come back to torture Oedipus because he's killed his father. So Laius doesn't want the Eumenides after him. So he can't kill the baby himself. And in fact, you notice he doesn't even put it on the hillside. Now they often put babies on the hillside. If they couldn't kill them directly, but they could put their fate in the hands of the gods. When you put the baby on the hillside, if the gods still want it to live, someone will come along and find it, somebody will adopt it, the wolves will raise it, like they do Romulus and Remus. You put it back in the hands of the gods. That way you didn't actually kill it. They would put you on, if you had any kind of birth defect, you went out on the hillside, and one of the biggest and most common birth defects was being born a woman. So girl children often were put on the hillside and left there. And if the gods wanted them to survive, then they took care of it. But you notice that Laius doesn't even do that. He doesn't directly put the baby on the hillside. What does he do?
He gives it to a shepherd.
He gives it to a servant who gives it to a shepherd. He gives it to a servant, and they pierced its ankles so it can't crawl away. That Oedipus means swollen foot. That's one of the ways that they eventually identify it. The servant, though, sees this little baby, and he doesn't want to kill it, and he bumps into it. Now, is it an accident that a shepherd just happens to show up who wants a baby?
No.
No, the gods made it that way. And he's no shepherd. He's no ordinary shepherd. He comes from Thrace. And in Thrace, there's a king, Polybus, and his wife, Merope. And Polybus and Merope have not been able to have any children. Everybody wants them to have children. Everybody wants them to have a son. Because if you don't have a son, there's going to be civil war. You have civil war, you kill one another, you probably lose your country. So they're real worried because they can't seem to have any kids. The shepherd knows that. Hey, I got just a place for this baby. Yeah, I'll take it. Goes back to Thrace and says to Polybus, look, I got this baby. Everybody wants you to have one. Say it's yours. Polybus says, well, we're getting on in life here. We're probably not going to have one anyway. Okay. And so they put out the word that Merope is pregnant. She wears some big dresses for a while. Then she produces the baby. Okay, it looks a lot old. You don't generally see a newborn baby with teeth, but people want the king and queen to have a son so much, they don't really care. They'll look the other way. So Oedipus grows up thinking that Polybus and Merope are his mother and father. And he hears rumors that they might not be, but he doesn't believe them. When he comes of age, he does just what Laius and Jocasta did. He wants to know what his life is going to be like. Any Greek would, so where does he go?
So they were,
He goes to the oracle. The oracle says, you're going to grow up to kill your father and marry your mother. What should Oedipus do when he hears that?
run away from home.
Kills.
He should accept it. He should accept the will of the gods. And if he does, he stays there in Thrace. He never meets his father. He never meets his mother. He never kills one and marries the other. If he accepts the will of the gods, the prophecy isn't fulfilled. It's only fulfilled because he won't accept the will of the gods. He runs away. When he runs away, he comes to a crossroads. And exactly the moment that his father, King Laius, shows up there. Is this an accident?
No.
No, this is the will of the gods working itself out. Laius tells him to get out of the way and let him pass, because he's a king. He's not going to step aside. Oedipus is the son of a king. He only steps aside for his father, so he won't step aside. So Laius sends the servants to throw him off the road. They fight with him. Oedipus kills them all, except one who's up in the carriage with the king, who just happens to be the guy who put him out on the hillside. Now, you might think that's a coincidence, but it actually makes sense. Being the king's body servant is a great job. You get to live in the best part of the palace. You travel around with him. Everybody treats you really well because you're close to him. It's one of the best jobs there is. Why did they give him that job? Because he had put the baby out on the hillside. The smart thing to do would have been to kill him, but they missed that one somehow. They weren't thinking well enough. And instead, he seems to be a faithful servant. So as far as they know, he killed the baby, so they give him a really good job. Oedipus goes to walk by. If Laius had only been humble instead of arrogant, he would live. But he isn't. He takes the goad, the three-pronged fork that they used to make the oxen go with, and he reaches out and whacks Oedipus on the head with it. Oedipus freaks, jumps up into the carriage, and strangles him. The servant runs away. Oedipus kills him. The servant goes back to Thebes. When he gets to Thebes, he says, a bunch of outlaws attacked us. Why doesn't he say one man did it?
Polish.
Yeah, well, they're going to say, one man, and you didn't stay and help the king? They'd have killed him. But if he said, oh, there was a whole bunch of them, they'd have said, well, there was nothing you could do. Coming back and tell us about it's about as good as you can do. So he goes back to Thebes, says the king was killed by a band of outlaws. Oedipus continues on his journey. He's not going anywhere in particular, but you know where he ends up. Back in Thebes, of course. In the meantime, Thebes has a real problem. The Sphinx, part lion, part eagle, part woman. It's no coincidence that almost all the monsters in Greek mythology are part woman. Why? What's the position of women in ancient classical Greece? Equals with men?
No.
No, they're lower than men. They're property. They couldn't be citizens. If you weren't a citizen, you were nothing. You were the same as a slave. They had no value. Their intellects weren't considered as great as men's. If a man came to visit your husband, the wife was sent to another part of the house with the children because she couldn't follow what was going on and she'd only ask ridiculous questions and interfere. Women are treated badly. Deep down, the Greeks knew when you treat people badly, they get even. And so it's kind of a projection of their innermost fears that women have it in for them. So they make all their monsters women. Medusa turns everybody to stone, another one is a woman. In any case, the Sphinx is there and she strikes a deal with the Thebans. She won't eat them all. If every day they send out the best and brightest young man to try to answer her riddle. And they agree to do that. She's been eating them one a day for a while. Oedipus goes wandering past. Sphinx says, wait a minute, you don't pass here without answering my riddle. Oedipus says, no problem, I'm good at riddles. What is it? What goes on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, 3 legs at evening? And the answer? A man. It's in the play. It goes on all fours as a baby in the morning. It walks upright in 2 legs in the afternoon. In the evening, it goes on 3 legs as an old man. Oedipus answers the riddle. The Sphinx is so upset she dashes her head against a rock and kills herself. Oedipus is the hero. Now, the succession in Thebes goes by blood, but it also goes by popular acclaim. The people want Oedipus to be the king. Before Oedipus shows up, Laius is dead, Jocasta is queen. But you got to have a guy that's in charge of things. So who's in charge before Oedipus shows up?
Her brother.
Her brother, Creon. Now when once Oedipus goes to Thebes and kills the Sphinx, it's no accident that he ends up married to his mother. It's not that he comes into Thebes and go, hey, who's a good-looking, mature woman? They're going to marry whoever the hero is to the queen. Because if they don't, okay, Oedipus comes, you make him king. You don't marry him to Jocasta. Jocasta remarries. Her children have a claim to the throne through Laius. Oedipus's children have a claim to the throne. What's going to happen in the next generation? Civil war. So how do you avoid that?
Married.
You marry him to the queen. That way all the children have Laius's claim through Jocasta, and they have Oedipus's claim. There isn't a corresponding claim that can be anywhere near as good, and you avoid civil war. Well, we're going to pick Oedipus up there next week. We'll finish that up, then we're going to do classical medieval.